Hello, it's Philip Taylor speaking from Richmond Green Chambers in London. I'm delighted to review Ursula Smartt's new book, Media and Entertainment Law, now in the 5th edition from Routledge, which is part of the Taylor and Francis group. Ursula is an expert in this area. I attended the launch with my wife of the book, and we were delightfully entertained by Ursula and by His Honour Jeff Blackett, a retired courts-martial judge, who made some very useful points. Ursula is primarily a teacher. She's a lecturer, and of course has a very substantial pedigree as a Justice of the Peace amongst her many other tremendously important active areas. She's a very active person, and this book is a tribute to the work that she has done over the years to try to educate people about what is, I think, a developing area of law. It's an important area for the 21st century as things change, and we've got a lot of things to look forward to, online safety bill amongst them, but we do need to start thinking about some of the legislation we've had of the past which needs to be urgently updated. So if they bother in the House of Commons in particular, and in the House of Lords more so, we could perhaps introduce some legislation that might modernise some of the law. However, at the moment we have some legislation and we have an interesting subject. Elizabeth wrote the main part of this review, and we've given it a title, having discussed it and attended the launch. Quote, "Anything that Ursula writes is worth reading," says His Honour Jeff Blackett. And he gave a wonderful speech introducing the book, because this is an authoritative and a detailed text on a key area of law, and it's now in a 5th edition for 2023. I'm recording this at the end of the year. Let's look at the book. It's a paperback. It's a heavy book, actually, because it's a teaching book primarily. There's the spine. You can probably see it there, like that. And then on the back, you probably can't make much out, but there's a lot of useful stuff. And some well-known people are commenting. Helena Kennedy, Queen's Counsel then, now King's Counsel, and Adrienne Page, who is actually a joint head of chambers at 5RB. She is now a King's Counsel as well, and a leading authority in this area. This is the book. Let's look inside it. What you've got at the back is a very detailed bibliography. An extremely helpful bibliography as well, I think. Then you've got what is actually a very small index right at the end, when I can get to it, right at the end. It's not a particularly long one, but you should be able to navigate your way through this book quite easily, because what you've got is, of course, a lot of blocked out highlighted bits. You've got footnotes as well. There's a lot of information in the book, and of course the actual index is by page number, because there isn't the paragraph number we have in some of the main textbooks. Then there's the comments again appear in the book itself. There's a nice picture. I'll just show you that's just a statement about the 5th edition. Then there's a nice picture of Ursula there. There's Ursula, and then there's the front page, a little dedication to us. And then you've got the book itself. You've got the contents section. It's a heavy book because it's glossy paper, but the way it goes, and I would say now, right, she hits the subject matter very quickly. Freedom of expression right at the beginning, and I will say now, I agree entirely with Ursula. Freedom of expression trumps, and I use that word carefully, trumps privacy. Just so that we know where we stand. Because frankly, there's still a lot of argument about that, and there shouldn't be, because the freedom of expression must come above anything else. Otherwise you have a dictatorship. It's a basic jurisprudential issue. Now, we've got the foreword here. Do read that, because it sets out what Ursula has done by changing the subject matter. And in fact, it's the reason that I say it's worth reading is because it's not by Ursula, it's someone who is actually commenting on what Ursula has produced. That's Adrienne Page from Gray's Inn Square. Then we've got Ursula's comments in the preface itself. Again, she explains all of the changes that she's put forward. I hope the readers enjoy this new edition. Yes, Ursula, we do. We certainly do. Now, moving on from there, we got acknowledgements again. And after that, a lot of people helped her. And then you've got quite useful glossary of acronyms and legal terms. I think very useful because this is a developing area of law for a new generation of people who are very media savvy, social media savvy and everything else. And we do need to know, this is actually alphabetical by the way, this glossary, but we do need to know a lot of these terms because older people like me, we forget sometimes what some of them mean, and it's useful. It's really quite useful just to remind ourselves. And in essence, as I said, what Ursula has produced here is a textbook, but it's more than that. There's the table of cases, a lot of cases, of course, some very interesting ones. And then we've got tables of, after that, of course, the usual suspects are here after the table. We've got the UK legislation, and obviously, as I write, the online safety bill, as it's now called, is going through Parliament, watered down unfortunately, but there we go. There's the legislation at the moment, but we will have more legislation, I'm quite sure. There are a few statutory instruments, and there are the treaties and international pieces of legislation which are also very important, because this is about the international community. And one of the problems with the English legal system is it's not catching up the way it should do, and we need a kick up the backside, if I can put it as crudely as that, to get ourselves moving into the 21st century so that we know where we're going. Now, she starts off, and this is the classic example. Chapter 1, freedom of expression. You've got a mini index, so you should find things very clearly. You see how she set it out. It's very good. Then you go from that, and then you've got the key points straight away, a bit like a learning outcomes, if you like, but it's what you're actually trying to find, and then you just go through, and then you've got 4 thoughts, little pieces of blocked standing out points to try to make you think about what the issues are. So the good teaching element there that comes in. And of course I have a PGC, so I'm bound to say that, aren't I? There's the index, sorry, there's the footnotes you can see at the bottom there. There's a lot of detail, so if you read through without looking at the footnotes, you get a general picture of the book, and it runs through that way. And again, you can see this is reporting legal proceedings, for instance, there. This is about open justice. An interesting area. Key points again, and then you go all the way through. As I say, it runs to 580 odd pages, 600, plus the bits and pieces. So it's a very substantial work, and I'm very pleased with it. What do we say in a short review? Because there's so much to say about the book. But we say that freedom of the press or the right to privacy, that's the issue. Whenever you or your clients stand on this issue, whatever their point of view, this new law text, now in its 5th edition, which is coming out regularly and updated from Ursula, provides in precise detail a rigorous and highly readable analysis of what has now become a key area of law. And I think it should be read by people, not just as students, but the wider community, because it affects a lot of people, and it's been something that has been underestimated by the politicians, by the lawyers, and by everybody else. And we've suddenly got to start grappling with things that we haven't really had much to do with before. Copiously and painstakingly researched, note the 9-page bibliography at the back. This is a law text with an unput-downable quality, as media and entertainment law now obviously encompasses the internet and all forms of social media, and Ursula certainly mentioned that in the launch, because the people today who are coming through the system as students and the people who are just going into the workplace are a very different type of person from the people I'm in the past used to dealing with, having worked for over 50 years, and I've seen the big changes that have happened since I left school at 16 in well, we won't say when, but it's rather a long time ago. The subject is therefore undeniably fascinating, I think it is certainly, with legal ramifications that will ultimately affect everybody who's ever watched television, read a newspaper, viewed streaming services of whatever nature, or accessed the internet, and lately have been affected or influenced by the all-pervasive influence of social media, whatever you add into that. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook and so on, all loads of them. Of course, whether it's for good or for ill, all too often ill in many people's views, it has affected the lives directly or indirectly of billions of people worldwide, because we are a global community and it's not going to change. We now move ahead. So as Baroness Helena Kennedy of the Shaw's King's Council observed in her when she launched the previous edition, which I attended, she said, Ursula's style of writing is extremely readable and yet legally accurate, and as every relevant case has been studied in detail from original court reports. Absolutely. You've got, I think, a really good balance in how those cases have actually been determined. And that is important, because it's not the prejudice that you have there, it's the balance that you need to try to understand. We all have our own personal views, but let's try to understand what is actually happening. And as senior lecturer in media law at the University of Lincoln, Barry Turner points out that the intellectual property law chapters are detailed and information filled in what is a remarkably detailed book. And in fact it is. The point made here is that this is an important reference for intellectual property itself and for media lawyers alike, because I come from a time in the history of English law where we didn't really have intellectual property. It was the law of tort, and then it's changed because it's become its own particular area of law. And of course media law has developed quite quickly with a lot of cases. The judges have picked it up very quickly as well, but we will get a lot of rulings. The people who've been slow have been the people down in Westminster, but that's for another day. Now, Adrienne Page, King's Counsel, says, and the contents page shows the sheer scale of the task for an academic author covering the modern day spectrum of activity in this field of law. Because primarily, you could perceive this book to be an academic book in that sense, but I think it's very user friendly, and I think anybody who's involved in this area, and you might have a client who comes to you with a problem. I've certainly had a number like this who've come to me with a problem. But of course I would say never go to law. That's the important thing, because you don't know how much it will cost. But if they are really concerned, this will set out where they might be going. Because you're talking about big money with the entertainment industry anyway, and you've got to be very careful. Certainly then, the book is overwhelmingly a valuable tool for researchers, containing as it does tables of cases, of UK legislation and of treaties and of international legislation, the latter of which further emphasises, we say, the book's international outlook and orientation for the 21st century, year 2023 and beyond. Also note that each chapter ends with a further reading section, very useful, certainly an encouragement for students. I'm not going to call them learners, they're students, as well as lawyers and any other interested parties who wish to undertake further research, because it is a developing area of law with no question. The social media concept is developing. I don't know where it's going to go. I sometimes wonder, my parents would never have understood any of this, but I actually wonder where we're going with it. But it's way outside what I could even perhaps think of. Now note too that there's a 17-page glossary, which I talked about earlier, which is at the beginning. It's A to Z, it's legal terms, and it's extremely useful for anyone involved in this field of law, because there are funny words which you may not quite understand, but we'll actually find this very interesting. We'll look at that again in a minute. Not only to mention journalists, of course, but to mention media consultants, advertising and PR practitioners, because it's bigger than just a little bits of compartments, if you like. You've got a much wider picture, which is actually the concept of media and entertainment law as a substantive law area in its own right. It's not merely a list then of terms and acronyms, but any and all of the terms listed are defined extensively by Ursula, and I thank her for that, and in some detail, with the definitions extending to at least half a page in certain cases. And again, I think that's important, because if you're teaching, there's nothing like a blank face when you mention something and you think, actually, they're playing because they don't really know what you're talking about, but they don't really want to ask. So you can find that out without looking bit of a twit. Now, the publishers are Routledge, part of Taylor and Francis Group, and they explain that the book is demonstrably expansive in its coverage of the law across the United Kingdom, including Scotland, Northern Ireland and the EU. I think it's important to bear that in mind, because we talk about the English legal system because there's a Scottish system and there's a Northern Ireland system. And of course Wales is part really of the English legal system, and it's got its own particular bits within the Principality. But I think it's important to bear in mind that, like planning, something like media and entertainment law would really have more of a wider jurisdiction across the whole of the 4 nations that make up the UK. And I think that's quite important as a final point. The publication date is cited as at 2023. The launch was just before Christmas 2022, so it's the sort of turn of the year. I think probably the date is, it may well be just before December. It's either December or January anyway. A big thank you to Ursula for this. Let's have one last look. There it is. Spine. And then on the back you can see we borrowed a few little quotes there. There's a lot of stuff. It mentions Ursula, Associate Professor of Law at the Northeastern University in London, UK and Boston, and Researcher in Media and Entertainment Law at the University of Surrey. There we go. Opening it in the middle, single family court and the Court of Protection. It's an area I'm involved in very heavily. That actually is very useful because there are a lot of things that crop up there. You can see the footnoting at the bottom. There isn't the paragraph numbering, but you should find what you're looking for. These are the children matters that we're talking about. The single family court and the Court of Protection. Difficult areas because that's where open justice doesn't apply. They are closed courts and secret courts. And I said before that I would just revisit the acronyms and legal terms again. I do think that's a very valuable part of this book, and I'm sure the students would agree with me on that. All in all, a very great book which we're delighted to review again. So very many thanks to Ursula for the huge amount of work she's put in and for the help she gives all of us. We're very grateful. Thank you very much. Bye bye.